Brett Hull, Court, Noel Campbell, Cujo, Jenny Oates, Brown, Chase, Fuhr, Zombo, Cecil, Butcher, Shanny, Tilly, Tuttle, Sutter, Twister, Turcotte, Kimball, Turgeon, Barron, Basson, Pronger, Pearson, Bergevin, Bozon, Al McInnes, Crab, Chuck, Howard, Chuck, Petrovicky, Pellerin, Dimitra, Yate, Corson, Conrad, Gretzky. Yes, sir, I'm a Blues fan. Yes, sir, I'm a Blues fan. Heartbreak's all I knew, man. That team from old St. Lou, man. Got a cup near 52, man. Give me a Let's Go Blue.
Get on your feet. Here's your starting lineup for Toasted STL. Tom Franklin, the man called Wags, and Blues Fan Reacts. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kraken Diner, where our Blue Plate special for today is the Tarasenko and White Russian. It is a beautiful shredded pork shoulder with mashed potatoes and a White Russian in honor of our favorite White Russian. Now, if that doesn't suit you, we also have an optional side of I'm Done side dishes. Where you can get yourself some well done, Vince Dunn for your defense, and that is an option for you if you're not if you don't have the money for the Tarasenko White Russian. Hello and welcome to Toasted St. Louis Blues. I'm already rambling because I am halfway into this White Russian. My buddy Wags is here with me. What's going on, bud?
Oh, not a whole lot. It's interesting doing something on a Monday afternoon. This is new for us, but it's expansion talk. It's the craziness that is the NHL. You know, the Blues released their preseason schedule today, so there is some positive news on the Blues side of things. But I'm excited because we actually got to build teams, and they may not pan out the way we think, but it's fun when you get to build your own team. It's almost like NHL, 94 or what have you. You just build your super team and go from there.
Or the NHL, I think it was 17 when you could build the Vegas roster. Like, I abuse that mode a lot, and I'll probably abuse it again when I unfortunately buy NHL 22. And I say that because it's EA, it's NHL, and that series has not improved in recent years. By the way, we're talking about the CapFriendly Seattle Kraken expansion draft simulator, which we will be running through ourselves and trying to pick the Seattle roster. And then when we're done with that, we will run it all through JFresh's war generator. We will try to assemble lineups, and we will see if our team would actually win games. So that is coming up. By the way, I did a expansion draft on Saturday, I think it was, like right after the list were released, and then it came. Actually, no, it would have been Sunday. And my roster sucked. I'm once I ran it through JFresh's simulator, it was like, oh my god, this team, like the projected points were like 85 games. It wasn't great. I went way too conservative. So we're gonna try to pick the roster here today. That's coming up in period number 2. Period number 1, though, let's get up to speed on where we are heading into this Seattle expansion draft. We will know at 6 p.m. local time Wednesday night who ultimately Seattle picked. Of course, we could hear before then a deal possibly struck. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just throw our cards on the table for period number 1. So they actually went and did it. The Blues left Vladimir Tarasenko unprotected, and the last slot, as I predicted, as probably many predicted, went to Ivan Barbashev, which is kind of interesting, Wags, when you see that put into context, because you're thinking, wait a second, they're not protecting their franchise, 30-plus goal scorer, and they're protecting their, third, fourth, line grinder. I mean, what's going on here? But when you take a look at the big picture, Wags, it makes sense, right?
It does, because it's not like you're just exposing Tarasenko. He's the only guy that Seattle would pick. I mean, we've heard talk about Vince Dunn being a selection for them. Jaden Schwartz is another guy. Yeah, he's a UFA, so there's some negotiating that has to go on there if Seattle were to keep him after the draft. So it's not like you're just putting Vlad out there and saying, hey, take him if you want him. And it gives you some interesting questions, because the whole Tarasenko trade stuff kind of happened within the last week or so. It's really, really hard to build a trade in a week for player of his caliber with the contract that it is as well. So don't take this as basically the Blues saying, hey, we got nothing as far as interest is concerned for Tarasenko. We're going to expose him and hope Seattle takes him for nothing. They may be banking on the hope that Seattle doesn't want Tarasenko. They do want a guy like a Vince Dunn or somebody else younger on that team. And it still allows them the possibility to protect a guy that maybe Seattle did want and facilitate a trade for Vladimir Tarasenko later. Now, there are rumors that some teams have been inquiring with Seattle about drafting Tarasenko and trading him.
Yes.
We'll get to that, but it's not totally and wholly unexpected with what they did. If there were more, or if there were less guys that Seattle would have been interested in on the Blues, roster, Buffalo, just throw that list out. But if Tarasenko was the only guy, yeah, then I would be a little concerned that, they'd get rid of him for nothing. But right now the Blues are kind of in a prime position. They can lose a guy and still have at least one that they can still make a trade for. Yes. To bring guys back in. So if they pick Dunn, you still have Tarasenko you can trade. If they do pick Tarasenko, you free up the money and you can still trade a Vince Dunn. Hell, if they pick a Jaden Schwartz, you can still trade Tarasenko and Dunn. So it's not as dire as people make it out to be. It's still a little shocking, but I'm okay with it.
I think the thing we can take comfort in is the fact that there are options out there for Tarasenko. I mean, that's one thing that Jeremy Rutherford made very clear. There were 4 offers, apparently, for Tarasenko before Saturday's deadline, where the other team would have taken on the full salary. No problem, we'll take it. But the return didn't exactly appease Armstrong at the time. Now, keep in mind, as there's been a lot of ballyhooed about whether, if you trade Tarasenko or you trade Vince Dunn before that Saturday deadline, you're still, you might still lose someone else that you don't want to lose as well. So you had to convince Doug Armstrong that not only was this package worth Vladimir Tarasenko, but you had to convince him as well that it's also worth losing potentially, a different player, which might have been, if Tarasenko was dealt before Saturday, you may have just told Vince Dunn to go pound sand, essentially, which I feel the organization's kind of doing anyway. But you want to get a return for Vince Dunn. So as Rodney Hale mentioned, there was a rumor that Seattle will take him and trade him to Philly. That rumor actually originated from Anthony Sanfilippo, who is with Crossing Broad. They were actually, him and Russ Joy were actually a part of the Hockey Podcast Network for a hot minute, and we've dealt with them a little bit. I trust them when I say they've heard that rumor. And rumor is basically that the Kraken will take Tarasenko and then we'll flip him to Philly for Jakub Voracek and a draft pick is what they were reporting and what I've heard as well. Probably wouldn't be a first, probably be like a second or something like that. So if you're Seattle, you get a winger in Voracek who, he's got big price tag, some term left, but he's still a good performer. He's 31 years old. I think he'll be 32 in about a month, and I think that he could play out the rest of his contract in Seattle just fine. He'd get a markable star, and they get a pick out of it. So, if you're Seattle, you couldn't take both Tarasenko and Voracek. So why not have one and a draft pick? Instead of just having one. Period. So that's kind of the philosophy there. At first, when I saw that, Wags, I was like, well, man, why can't we have Voracek? But then it's like he makes. I don't think he would fit with the Blues. We have too many playmakers as it is, and Voracek is exclusively a playmaker, and that cap hit's kind of Wags, not ideal.
No, it's not ideal, and the whole purpose of letting Tarasenko go either through trade or to the Kraken is to give some cap space for the Blues. I mean, they're still right up against it this year. And you're looking at a potential of going out there and maybe making a pitch for a Gabriel Landeskog, or maybe going out and making a pitch for Dougie Hamilton, bringing guys in that will cost some money. You got to free some stuff up to get younger, to get a little bit more in the mode that you want this team going forward as. So yeah, you're not going to bring in a guy that's up there in age that still has that contract and term if you're already trying to get rid of a guy that has age and term on a contract that's high value. So yeah, it makes sense that they wouldn't have made that deal with Philadelphia. With Seattle in that instance, in that aspect, you're still banking on Philly going, yes, we are going to do that. And that's a really interesting thing about this expansion draft. Like, how how trusting is Seattle of other GMs to say, hey, look, if you draft this guy, this is the deal we'll make. I mean, how does that all work? And that's something we're not privy to. I mean, if you have a written agreement that says, hey, you draft this guy, we'll trade you these guys, and then you pick this guy from our team. If it's all in writing and it's all legit, then yeah, Seattle probably ends up doing that. But if it's like that word of mouth, that, hey, that handshake deal with another GM, I mean, it's definitely a risk you're taking. You might be saddled with a big contract if they get cold feet and go, yeah, you know what? We saw the medical reports. Maybe we don't want Vladimir Tarasenko. And that's not the only guy that they could do that with. There are other guys that they could do that and flip as well to keep, to get draft picks. We saw Vegas do it a couple of times in their expansion draft as well.
Well, and the good thing about, you mentioned, the medical reports, apparently the teams that have inquired on Tarasenko are fine with his medical. They're not too worried about his shoulder. I mean, obviously they can't have 100% certainty, but they feel pretty good that the shoulder issue is fixed. But the other thing here is, Tarasenko himself, it was very stunning to me to see Jeremy Rutherford come out and say that we have reached the point of no return with Vladimir Tarasenko. Apparently, Tarasenko is just fucking done, basically, with the whole St. Louis experience. In fact, I think he even mentioned that there's maybe not him, but someone mentioned that there's a possibility that he just says fuck it and opens up his whole no trade list. Maybe the Tarasenko to Buffalo dream could indeed happen, just because he's just ready. He's apparently ready to move on. And apparently Blues fans are ready to move on as well, because I put up a Twitter poll on the Toasted St. Louis Twitter account, which make sure you're following that, by the way, for the latest Toasted St. Louis info and discussion. Which St. Louis Blues player are you hoping the Seattle Kraken takes in the expansion draft? There were 103 votes in total. Thank you, guys. 72.8% say they are hoping Seattle takes Vladimir Tarasenko. Imagine, Wags, this was right after Tarasenko is healthy, he's on the ice, and you're asking fans, hey, would you rather Seattle take Vladimir Tarasenko or Vince Dunn? First of all, you'd get a cup of soda probably thrown in your face for even suggesting that Tarasenko would be left unprotected. Because I remember we were kind of talking about that. I think I was out on the lake when we were discussing the idea of Tarasenko possibly being left exposed. And you're dealing with is this going to offend him? Is this going to piss him off? Or is this going to be a wake-up call? Well, don't have to worry about that anymore. That's done. But yeah, at the time, it would have seemed inconceivable to me that fans would have rather had Seattle take Tarasenko over Vince Dunn. Because keep in mind, to be a St. Louis Blues fan, you need to have a whipping boy on the team at all times. I mean, for the longest time, it was Patrick Berglund. For the first season, it was Justin Falk. I think this year it became Vince Dunn, because we saw Vince Dunn start to get those top 4 minutes that we were all kind of clamoring for, that all the analysts would say, well, he's great, but he doesn't play against top 4. Well, now he's playing against top 4, and he's suboptimal against top 4, as we kind of learned this year. So what a difference a few months makes, Wags.
Yeah, I mean, back in that time frame, I was of the mindset that exposing Tarasenko was probably the right move for the Blues, because you had a little bit of a track record as far as this team's ability to win without him. You had the multiple surgeries, and it wasn't so much that I was disinterested in his play and being a St. Louis Blue. It just made business sense to do it. Either you get a guy that's motivated to show why he shouldn't have been exposed, or you get a guy that ends up being taken and you get $7.5 million off of your books. So this was, for me, it was never about, I was upset with Tarasenko and his play here, and I wanted to get rid of him. I wanted Tarasenko to finish his career here. But as I said on a Twitter comment earlier this week, the days of franchise players sticking with the team for their entire career is completely and utterly over. And it's not because they don't want to be here. It's just a business decision. And I think most Blues fans, that's why they are hoping Tarasenko would be picked by Seattle if it came down to those two, because it's the business side of it. The $7.5 million off the books. Yeah, you're not getting anything in return, but you still have Dunn, who you could potentially trade as well. And honestly, you might get more value from a Vince Dunn trade than a Vladimir Tarasenko trade because he's a younger player. He still has that offensive upside, and a lot of teams are looking at the analytics and they say, oh, he's a good analytics darling. Let's trade something for him, because there were rumors going around he could get a first-round pick in exchange for Vince Dunn. You're not going to get that with a Tarasenko. You may still get a good return for it, but not as good as Dunn could give you. So I think a lot of fans look at it, and even if you would go back a couple months to that conversation, I think a lot of fans would see our side of it and say, yeah, business-wise, it would make sense for Tarasenko to be exposed and taken. You get money, and you can still trade Vince Dunn. I think fans want both of them gone. I'm of the mindset as well. And when we get to our picks a little bit later, you might be surprised as to where I go with my Blues pick.
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, I think I'll have some doozies in there as well. But getting back to Vince Dunn, I mean, remember Jeremy Rutherford said when we were talking about rumors last week that Calgary is interested in Vince Dunn, and they have a certain St. Louis native that would be of interest, I think, to most St. Louis Blues fans, one Matthew Tkachuk. So keep that dream going. But yeah, I'm kind of with Rodney Hale here. He's happy that Tarasenko is unprotected, so we have money to get Landeskog and Hyman plus re-sign our guys. I think it's going to be one or the other with Landeskog or Hyman. I think because the Blues aren't the only team that needs, top 6 left wingers. I mean, I think basically every NHL team would love to have, a Landeskog or a Hyman. Hyman is a guy that we haven't really talked about too much here, but he's a typical two-way guy that plays hard. He's a fan favorite in Toronto. He constantly plays up on the top line, even though he may not have the top line talent, just because for the longest time, that was the only player they could trust to put in max effort at the top line. Now, he does have some injury issues, but and some people think he might get a little overpaid this offseason. I think that's still a good plan B in case Landeskog does not become a Blue.
So wait, you're saying a highly touted Toronto Maple Leaf that has upside and an injury history, you say you might be able to bring him to St. Louis. I'm pretty sure we had a guy that we traded for that had the same sort of kind of background. An Alexander Steen, maybe.
I can hear Luke Whitbin just giggling uncontrollably right about now as we're describing his, anointed one. Very similar. Those two actually, that's a good comp because they're both very similar type of players. I mean, two-way talent, can score, probably has, probably a good locker room guy from all accounts. There's a lot to like with Zach Hyman. Blues Fan Reacts could not be a part of the show. He is 21 years old now, and he's celebrating his birthday. You can actually have some White Russians legally now, by the way. Salud. He says there are rumors that Hoffman is signing in Montreal now, which I can see that happening. By the way, you were talking, a little bit about, we were talking about Tarasenko going to Seattle and getting flipped. How about this Carey Price saga that is going on? So he gets asked to waive his no movement clause because they really want to protect Jake Allen. St. Louis Blues fans, they actually want Jake Allen. Can you believe it? And to be fair, he's got a good cap hit, and there's a feeling that he's actually could be a number one, which oh God, wait until they realize. But let's let them discover that on their own. So they make Carey Price available for the expansion draft. Price agrees to waive his no movement clause. And what a roller coaster this saga has been since that happened. Because number one, everyone and their mother were all fantasizing about Carey Price playing in Seattle because he's a Pacific Northwest guy. I mean, of course, we all associate with Carey Price with Montreal, but he grew up in British Columbia, just up the coast from Seattle. And in the WHL, he played for the Tri-City Americans, which, of course, as the name indicates, is in America and is in the state of Washington. And he is a legend in the WHL and with Tri-City. He was just phenomenal for them. I mean, one of the best goaltending seasons of all time. They still revere him there. So you have this glowing, pulsating, franchise-level player who just quarterbacked his team to the Stanley Cup final, is a local hero, one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. His name is not Marc-Andre Fleury, although this is a similar situation to the Vegas thing. And everyone was thinking that this is going to be a slam dunk Seattle's going to take Carey Price, even with his contract. At the very least, to flip back to Montreal for prospects and picks, and maybe they eat some of his, $10.5 million cap. Probably not like the full 50%, but some of it to give Montreal some relief. Well, the NHL, because they picked the greatest hills to die on, Tampa Bay, $18 million over the cap. Oh, you're fine. Go enjoy your Stanley Cup. That's 2 in a row. Yeah, good for you. Montreal went to save a little money on Carey Price. No. You cannot do that, and kind of could put the kibosh on that. So and I think as time was going on, I think a lot of people were realizing that that was maybe the plan here, was to have Seattle launder some of, Price's money. So right after that comes down, and right after NHL shakes the finger at Montreal, all of a sudden Carey Price has a hip problem that we didn't hear about at all during the playoffs, and it sure did not impact his play during the playoffs, but now he's got a hip problem. So, Wags, what the fuck is going on here? I mean, I think I just watched an episode of As the World Turns, play out and over the last 36 hours.
Yeah, pretty much. You're wondering why, the NHL didn't see this potentially coming as well, because the fact that they had to waited until Price waived his no movement clause, and then the NHL goes, whoa, you're not going to be able to do something like that. Like, how did they not see something like that coming? I mean, we didn't really see a lot of it during the Vegas expansion draft, but
yeah,
it's interesting that that's the case. Now, you look at it and, Montreal's like, okay, we're gonna have you waive it. They're gonna take you and trade you back, and then this happens, and like you said, all of a sudden he's got a hip and a knee injury. Yeah, that's about trying to scare Seattle off. Now, here's the thing, though. With that contract, Seattle may still be scared off. You may not have had to add the injury into it, but the rumors are coming out that it's not just Shea Weber that could miss most of next season. Price could miss most of next season as well, and that might have been another impetus for why they protected Jake Allen as well, because now you're guaranteed to have a guy that knows the system, knows the team, and played well this year when Price was absent. So all this makes me sit there and think that, honestly, him going to Seattle was actually never in the equation. Because why would you? I mean, I don't think that's the way it would. Now, if it worked out where they could have gotten him back in a trade with less money, yeah, I think that would have worked. But I don't think that was the whole impetus for him waiving the no movement and protecting Jake Allen. I think it would have been an added benefit for sure. But I think they really were just looking to make sure they had a goalie going into next season. And like you said, the NHL, to die on that hill, I mean, you want to build fans throughout the league. And I can see why they did it, though. If Seattle sits there and goes, hey, we're drafting Carey Price, Seattle fans are going to be like, hell yeah, we got Carey Price. And then to turn right around and say, yeah, but we're trading it back to Montreal for picks and some cap relief for them. Seattle fans would be pissed about that, because you get all excited about it, and then 30 seconds later, he's back to Montreal. He never even set foot in Seattle. You can't sell a Kraken jersey with Price on the backside when he's with your team for 30 seconds.
I was going to say, imagine all of the Carey Price Kraken jersey pre-orders that could be filed in 30 seconds before Price is traded back. I mean, it would be like getting a Mike Richter Nashville Predators jersey.
Ooh.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, people tend to forget that Richter technically wasn't a career Ranger. For a hot second, he was a Predator. But yeah, that's part of the fun of the expansion drafts. By the way, that rumor about Mike Hoffman came from Andy Strickland, who just tweeted out in the last 20 minutes. Expect Montreal to pick talks back up from last season with Mike Hoffman. Chose to sign with the Blues over the Habs, even though Montreal offered close to $1 million more. But he also notes that St. Louis has expressed interest in bringing him back. Of course, Hoffman is exposed to Seattle. Funny enough, Blues Fan Reacts actually had the Blues protecting Mike Hoffman in his expansion list. So interesting to see what transpires with that. If the Kraken take Tarasenko, the Blues are about to have $24.5 million to play with. Remember when we were, LTIRing Steen and Tarasenko, and we were pinching pennies, and we had to sign Hoffman to a tryout just to circumvent the salary cap. And I don't think he even played the first game because of salary cap reasons. Now all of a sudden, we're about to have $24.5 million. Now, You do have Hoffman out there. You have Tyler Bozak. Do you want to re-sign him? He's an unrestricted free agent. The Jaden Schwartz question is still out there. Ivan Barbashev is arbitration eligible, as is Zachary Sanford. I really hope that Sanford disappears this offseason some way, somehow. Keep the dream alive. Kyrou and Thomas are also restricted free agents, but they're not arbitration eligible, so they shouldn't get too big of raises, if anything. And, of course, Vince Dunn is arbitration eligible, but who cares? He's gone. So, but with $24.5 million, so, we're talking like about Gabriel Landeskog becoming a St. Louis Blue. Reportedly, the whole $7 million per thing, that was if he gave Colorado a hometown discount, which apparently he was willing to give, but Colorado was playing hardball with him, and apparently that situation might be past the point of no return, which is, according to, I've checked Avs Twitter in the past week, and everyone's having a meltdown because everyone thought that this would be no problem. Landeskog would resign. Nope. So if the Blues get, Landeskog, that's $9.5 million you're probably sinking, into him. You still have about $15 million left to play with. And, you have a couple of needs, but nothing too major. I don't think Barbashev is going to break the bank. I don't think Bozak is going to break the bank. At this point, if Hoffman is interested in going to Montreal and they're going to throw money at him because they have money to throw, he's probably not coming back. Jaden Schwartz, I don't think he comes back. He might get a decent offer. I hear Vancouver's really hot on Jaden Schwartz, so he may not be coming back. So you have all this money to spend. What do you spend that money on? I mean, let's assume that, I'm assuming that they'll, throw it at Landeskog, but what do you think? What would you do?
I mean, if Landeskog is intent on getting that amount and he does want to come to St. Louis, I mean, the reports are that he's got a couple of teams out there that he's willing to talk with, and the Blues are one of them. I think you do have to go after him number one overall. And yes, he's going to end up making more than your captain, by $2 million more, but Landeskog is probably worth more than a Ryan O'Reilly right now, and even a Braden Shen. I mean, they're both great players, but Landeskog is definitely a step above that. Now, he's also just a playmaker. He's not a prolific scorer. Yes, he scores a lot of goals, but he's not the go-to goal scorer. So that's the other thing you have to weigh into that as well. Are you willing to pay $9.5 million to a guy that isn't going to be a 40-goal scorer, but if he's able to get that line to be a 70, 80 goal scoring line, that might be worth it. And then when you talk about where else you're going to throw the money at, you have to make the decision right now, I think, on Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas. I think you need to lock them up long-term. I think you need to say, hey, we're either going to do this or we're not. And I think they end up taking that step with both of those guys. I think they both proved Kyrou a little bit more than Thomas, but Thomas had a hell of a rookie year. So I think they will go after that. Barbashev, I think you also have to maybe make the decision on if you want to have him long-term as well. Obviously, you protected him in the expansion draft. So, you have to weigh that as well. And Rodney's right. You got to be careful about Parayko potentially needing to be re-signed next year as well. You have to make that decision too. So do you maybe let a guy maybe let a couple guys walk and hope that you can sign some of these younger kids to shorter, better deals so you can sign Parayko next year? Or are you taking this year to really gauge the market on a Colton Parayko?
And he's got a point with O'Reilly. I had to do a double take there, but we forget that O'Reilly only has 2 years left before he's a free agent. I think we all kind of expect that a contract to just last forever, I guess, but because when they got him, they still had 5 years left on it. But no, he's down to 2. He's a free agent after, 2 seasons from now. And really, when you look at the Blues roster here, I mean, Braden Shen is inked up, well beyond the next 2 years. But besides that, if they get rid of Tarasenko, the only players you have signed beyond 2 years from now are Shen, Falk, Krug, and Scandella and Binnington. That is 5 players. And of course, the St. Louis Blues Twitter, by the way, just made a big, big stink about, we don't have any players from the 2017 expansion list. That's nothing to brag about. That means that you've gone through some turmoil the last couple of years, and comparing yourself, to Detroit, and I think the other team was Buffalo, among the teams that have, completely brand new protection lists. Not the greatest thing to celebrate, Blues Twitter, but what do I know?
I mean, it's not. You got to remember, though. I mean, a lot of them left for reasons that are actually legit. I mean, Pietrangelo gone because he wanted a no movement clause, and he didn't. And Doug Armstrong didn't want to go that direction. Vladimir Tarasenko, you know what you're getting out of that, and then you've got a bunch of guys that necessarily weren't even on this team at that point. So you may have actually upgraded potentially at that point as well. So don't like totally poo-poo that, but yeah, having that longevity is something that, 3-4 years difference. You might want to have a couple more guys that you protected outside of the entire list being different.
Yeah, that is true. And Abomination Gaming, hopefully he's still around. He asked earlier, do you think it'd be possible to get Landeskog and Hamilton?
No.
In theory, yes, but the Blues do not need Dougie Hamilton. He's another right-handed defenseman and would create the same issue that Justin Falk ran into his first year as a Blue. And I don't think Dougie Hamilton can play on his offhand. So, it would not solve a problem. It would create one with Dougie Hamilton. As talented as he is, he's going to get paid this offseason, I'm sure. But the Blues need more of a Jamie Oleksiak type on defense if they're going to spend that 14 or 15 million or 22 million or however much they have this offseason. They need some beef on their defense, and Jamie Oleksiak would provide that beef. To me, he would be a direct substitution for Vince Dunn and Carl Gunnarsson on the roster, and he would still have room to give Nico Mikkola, Jake Wallman, and even Scott Prunovich, his chance, because as we know, Prunovich can play on the right side. So Rodney Hale says also Alex Martinez could be an option. Could be. To me, he'd be like a discount option though. But and not only that, but I don't know if he's necessarily what the Blues need. If we're talking about beefy defensive first guys, but he'd be a decent plan B. I think I would say Alec Martinez would be. So that's where we kind of stand right now. And I'm kind of the belief that I think definitely by, if not Wednesday, maybe even as soon as Thursday, Vladimir Tarasenko is going to be somewhere else. It sounds like there is a market for him. So I'm wearing my Vladimir Tarasenko 91 today because it's one of the last days that I can wear it and still call him a St. Louis Blue. And it's going to be sad because this jersey, I think it was like jersey number 3 of all time that I've had. This was Gretzky was number 1. Kachuk was number 2. And then this kicked off my hockey jersey buying frenzy. I didn't know how to buy a hockey jersey, and then I figured that out, and I was like, wait a second, I can. These jerseys aren't that expensive. So, and of course, my wallet said otherwise. But besides the point, but yeah, as Rod. But by the way, Alec Martinez blocked so many shots. So that would be
the Blues have missed is guys that block shots and beefy defenders that can move players away from their crease.
Yes, absolutely. So that's where we stand right now. I think we pretty much covered everything. I mean, it's been a very active past couple of days. So, but I think we're pretty much on top of everything. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go to period number 2, and we will try to pick the Seattle expansion roster. And I guarantee you it's probably going to be in shambles in 24 hours because we haven't done any real pre-draft trades yet. So, but we're going to give it a shot anyway because, we like playing with these sort of toys. So we're going to play with some toys now for period number 2. All right, so in case you don't know, CapFriendly has a Seattle expansion draft tool, and if you go to it, they've automatically protected the players that the teams picked out over the weekend, so there's nothing you have to do here. All you got to do is click on the draft team and build a roster. It's so simple. It is so simple, right? So let's go ahead, and we're going to go in alphabetical order. That means we will get to the St. Louis Blues a little later on, and we're going to make our picks and then try to come to a consensus on those picks. Good luck with that. Ashley Jones, you came in just in time for the Fire and the Fury because me and Wags are going to bicker over players here for the next 20 minutes or so. So thank you for joining us, Ashley. Let's go ahead and start with the Anaheim Ducks. And for the benefit of our audio listeners who can't see the CapFriendly graphic right now, I will try to be descriptive as possible for you. So The Ducks have exposed Ryan Getzlaf, Adam Henrique, David Backes, Dan Heinen, Sonny Milano, Derek Grant, and those are really, and Alexander Volkov's kind of an interesting young forward. They exposed Kevin Shattenkirk on defense, which was kind of a surprise. He's got 2 years left at a very reasonable cap hit. Hayden Fleury, another kind of a surprise. He's a good young defenseman they acquired at the deadline. Jacob Larson, Brendan Gooley, and then their goaltender is Anthony Stolarz. So you went with, who did you go with here?
I went with Stolarz, actually.
You went with Stolarz, okay.
Yeah.
Why Stolarz?
I needed a third goaltender, and kind of looking at Anaheim overall. I mean, the only other guy I could really make an argument for, and like you said, a bit of surprise was the Hayden Fleury pick.
Yeah.
And I could see them going that direction because, young guy, another year on him. He's an RFA after that. He's got a good amount of salary, $1.3 million. So I could see them going that direction. But, when we get to the other goaltender picks, it kind of, for me, made sense to go with the guy that has seen some time in the league and has a decent chance at being okay as a backup.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I would see him as in that role this year if they needed to press him into service. And after going through the rest of it, he was the one guy of the teams I had left to pick from that kind of made sense to go to Seattle, at least at the point when I was making that pick.
So obviously you did not go through in alphabetical order like we were doing. You just kind of bounced around. Okay, that's fine. Yep. I found that I had no problem getting 4 goaltenders for Seattle, but then again, I did pick Carey Price for them. I'm not going to do that this time. So we may revisit this. I personally think that they'll take one of the defenders. I could see the case for Shattenkirk because, again, that's not a bad cap hit. And he's still productive, and he's got, he's inked up for 2 more years. But they trade the Ducks traded some good assets to get Hayden Fleury at the deadline, and I think it's kind of all. I mean, that's what surprises me is the fact that they've exposed him after getting him at the deadline and paying what they did. I'm gonna go with Fleury. I'm going to pick Fleury here, but we can always revisit. None of these picks are set in stone until the very end. Arizona. They could have Andrew Ladd. I don't think they're going to jump on that.
No.
Arizona didn't have a whole lot to offer here. I mean, as one might expect, Tyler Pitlick, Derek Brassard, Christian Fisher, 24-year-old right winger, Braden Burke, another 24-year-old, Tyler Steenbergen, John Hayden. On defense, they had Nicholas Hjalmarsson, who's a pending free agent, so don't get too excited. Alex Goligoski, who's also a pending free agent. Jason Demers, who's same thing. The only real defender of note, I think, here was Ilya Lyubushkin, who is kind of an analytics favorite. I saw JFresh had him ranked pretty high, but and then their goaltenders, Antti Ranta and Joseph Coronar, formerly of the San Jose Sharks, was swapped for Aiden Hill over the weekend, and San Jose is protecting Aiden Hill. So that was a reason why that deal was made. So who do you got for Arizona?
Well, I went with Michael Bunting, but then I realized, you know what? He still has 6 games remaining before he meets the requirements, which is interesting because I'm not sure why they have these guys with games remaining on this list if they're able to be taken. So actually, I'll end up changing it. I'm actually going to go with Christian Fisher, young guy, $1 million, RFA, still under contract through 2022. It probably makes the most sense. A young forward and a guy that has a little bit of upside. So I would take Christian Fisher in this instance. Yeah, three goals last year, but he did have 15 in 2017-18. So he has talent and ability. It looks like he played in a couple less games than expected last year. But I'll go with Christian Fisher in this instance.
Yeah, I went with Fisher as well. I mean, 32nd overall pick. I mean, almost a first rounder, basically. 6'2", 214 pounds, can throw the body a little bit. At the very worst, he becomes a bottom 6 mucker for Seattle. Kind of reminds me of like a Tomas Nosek from, when Vegas took it from Detroit. No one really expected much from him, and then he kind of flourished. He just needed that right situation. So I went with Fisher as well. So I think they'd be based on what else is available, I don't see them taking anyone else.
I mean, Labushkin maybe. It just depends on what they look at as far as what their higher end defenders are like.
Yeah, and they're not taking Ronta Klaus because he is pending free agents, and he's also made of glass. So Boston Bruins. They have you see David Krejci, you see Taylor Hall, and think ooh, but then they're also unrestricted free agents. Also Taylor Hall, as I discussed with a fan earlier today, was thinking, oh, we can get Landeskog and Taylor Hall. Well, don't get excited about Taylor Hall. He hasn't scored 20 goals a season in the past 3 seasons, so just kind of put a lid on that. Andre Kasha, who is a talented young winger but has had trouble staying healthy. Nick Ritchie, who was a former highly touted winger with the Ducks. His stars kind of faded a little bit, but he's not been bad with Boston. Chris Wagner, Sean Corrali, Curtis Lazar, who I think was a Blues prospect at one point, or at the very least was taken with a pick the Blues traded. I remember doing a kind of a trade vortex and he popped up. Zach Senyshyn, who was a former, highly touted forward. There's a trend here with Boston, Wax. Former highly touted forwards that suddenly find themselves exposed. Defense, you have John Moore, Mike Riley. Some interesting names here, though. Connor Clifton, Jeremy Lauzon, and Steven Kampfer, he's older. I wouldn't say him so much. Jacob Zaboral's only 24. And then you have the Tuukka Rask and Yaroslav Halak connection at goal, but they're both pending free agents, and I just don't see Seattle taking a plunge on them. So who do you got for Boston?
I went with Jeremy Lauzon. In this instance, once again, a young guy, good term. He's signed for the next year. He's a restricted free agent. It's a lot of people were picking him as the guy that they would take from Boston. Now, once again, you could sit there and say maybe they go out and pick a UFA that they maybe can trade the rights for and all that kind of stuff. So there are ways that they can go around this, but I think Lauzon is the guy to go, and he hasn't had a whole lot of appearances in the NHL, but he had 41 games last year, not too terrible.
Yeah, he was a regular for Boston last season. I would say 41 out of 56 makes him a regular. Yeah. Gets good marks for his ability to on his own eyes. He's young, 24 years old, under a little bit of team control. He was the one I went with. I was kind of toying between him and Connor Clifton. Similar situations, similar type of defenders. Clifton's just a bit older though, so I would say go with the one with the less tread on it. So we both are picking Jeremy Lauzon for Boston. I can very well see that being the pick, but there is a couple interesting options that Boston has there for sure. Now for a team that has no interesting options whatsoever is the Buffalo Sabres. So we love to pick on Buffalo. Seattle they have their choice of Jeff Skinner, Kyle Okposo, Cody Eakin, Zemgus. I can't even say his name. Gergensons. Thank you. Gergensons. It sounds like something you do when you're gargling scope. And of course, Toby Ryder for you Toby Ryder fans, and Drake Kajula for you Drake Kajula fans. On defense, it's even more embarrassing. Colin Miller and Jake McCabe and William Borgen. Those are your defenders. Starter Hutton is available. He's exposed, but he's also a pending free agent. He's 35. And that's pretty much it. So which one, after staring at this list and probably going cross-eyed for a while like I did, which one did you finally take?
This is one of the last teams that I made a pick for, because it was more a matter of, what do I have left to pick than anything else. It sounds bad, but I went with Colin Miller. He's a guy that has a little bit of experience in the NHL. He is a guy that has a decent cap hit. He's got another year under his belt. He is a UFA after this, so you can move on from him after that. I think it's one of those low-end kind of picks. He's played in Buffalo. So are you really going to sit there and go, and he was actually part of Vegas back in the day too. So maybe this is the second time's the charm. He had a decent career in Vegas. 13 goals and 57 assists. So he had a good experience in Vegas, and I could see Seattle taking him with the experience of being a guy that's been a part of this already, and maybe being a guy that can speak to experience to the guys that are coming in now.
Kind of an interesting small world. He was also plucked from Boston, and we were just talking about Boston taking another young defender. So Colin Miller, as you mentioned, 10 goals, 31 assists in that first season. He got that contract that he has now because of that season, and then he just kind of found himself, lost in the numbers game a little bit as Vegas continued to add players. Bet you there. I wonder if you're a Vegas fan, if you're somewhat sad that you can't shed a player to Seattle because you have no money.
You need it.
You need all the money you can get right now because apparently you want Tarasenko too. So,
Can Vegas make a trade with Seattle at the expansion draft?
I mean, they could.
I mean,
and it'd be very sad because that means Tarasenko stays in the West and gets to ruin our lives alongside Alex Pietrangelo.
No.
Let's
not think like that. Let's keep going.
Let's get into Philly.
Look, Buffalo has really gotten us down even further in the dumps. Thanks, Buffalo.
Yeah, and I also went with Colin Miller just simply because I couldn't take anyone else and look at myself in the mirror anymore. So Colin Miller is unfortunately our pick for the Buffalo Sabres. All right, moving on down the line here, we have the Calgary Flames. Yay, a good team.
No.
They have Milan Lucic available. Good luck with that. Derek Ryan, Josh Lavo, Matthew Phillips, 23-year-old center, intriguing option there. That's kind of it for the forwards. On defense, Mark Giordano, who has been kind of like the heart and soul of their defense, really since the Dead Sea had the sniffles. He is available. Oliver Kylington, 24 years old, decent young defender. And that is really it for the interesting options there. Tyler Parsons, a 23-year-old goalie, is also available. So who did you have Calgary going with?
I went with Giordano. You need a guy with good term but good experience. Yes, the cap hit is high, but you also need to make sure you hit the minimum cap hit. So that's going to go a long way to doing that. I think he's a guy that can anchor that defensive core right off the bat. And like you said, there's not a whole lot forward-wise that you sit there and go, I mean, once again, depending on how they see their defense stacking up, maybe they do go for a younger player, a guy that, like a Matthew Phillips, although he has only 26 games remaining before he's eligible. They just really don't have anybody that you can take. It's almost like Giordano's kind of the basic pick from Calgary. He's like the only guy that you can really take that may make a difference. And he's not too far removed from, winning a Norris Trophy as well. So he may be 37, but I still think he's got a little bit left in the tank, and going on a run in Seattle may be where it happens.
I originally went with Matthew Phillips, just because, hey, he's young, he's projectable. But I've also heard that he's on the smallish side, may not be an ideal NHL, type of a prospect. So you're pretty much buying a lottery ticket there. Whereas you have Mark Giordano, who, we can go and take a look at his stats a little bit, has been such a key part of that Calgary defense for so long. He is a proven producer every single year as we pull up his stats here. I mean, he started with Calgary right after the mid-2000s lockout. That's how long he's been playing. And if you're watching the Hockey DB on our video stream right now, you can see he's a proven point producer at 21 goals just a few years ago. Even though his goal output has kind of, subsided a little bit as he's gotten older, he still is a good puck mover, reliable on his own end, good leader. I mean, if you're looking for a guy that could possibly be your captain in your first season, that could be it. The only thing with Giordano is that, he does have 1 year left, but if you're a team like Seattle, and that's something I forgot when I was putting together my list, is that you also want players that you might be able to flip at the deadline.
Yep.
And Giordano, I think, would be an ideal candidate for that type of guy that you pick, and then you flip him at the deadline, get some assets, and you probably turn out way better than you did if you had taken a Matthew Phillips or Josh Lavo. So I'm going to go with Giordano as well. Giordano is the pick from Calgary. Just catching up some picks real quick. We talked about this earlier. Derek reading about, he's talking about the Seattle taking Tarasenko and flipping him to Philly for Voracek and a mid pick. We were kind of talking about that earlier. That's a legit rumor. That's from the Crossing Broad guys, and we dealt with them before. They're professional, and I believe that rumor. And then apparently it's also being discussed among other teams as well. We just know about Philly at this point. Back to the draft, Carolina Hurricanes. So, one of the best teams in the East, made a good playoff run. They've got a decent assortment of players to pick from, as you might imagine. Nino Niederreiter, one of them, 28-year-old left winger. Brock McGinn, Jordan Martinook, Morgan Geekie, I don't think you take a guy named Geekie in an expansion draft. Even if he is 22 and has some decent potential. On defense, Dougie Hamilton. You have Jake Gardner, young defender Jake Bean, and Yanni Hakanpää, who apparently is BFFs with Nico Mikkola. So imagine Mikkola and Hakanpää on the same team, and imagine John Kelly and Chris Gerber having to say those names when they're partners. Nightmare. And then goaltending wise, James Reimer and Peter Mrazek are both available, but they're both unrestricted free agents. Who do you got here?
I was leaning a little bit toward Morgan Geekie just because of the youth.
Did I talk you out of it?
You did, but I ended up picking Nino Niederreiter. Once again, another guy that has a higher cap hit to help you get up to that cap floor. Still has a little bit of speed, and he's been good for Carolina as well. And you have to bring in guys that are going to produce. And you look at what Vegas did, and they brought in guys that maybe weren't top-line guys, but still were good producers, and you throw them all together, and they build up the cast-offs essentially. And you look at Niederreiter's career in Carolina; he's actually improved after his down year in Minnesota. Yep. 30 points, 29 points, 34 points. He's not going to light up the score line, but he does enough, and he's got a little bit of speed, so that's going to help as well.
To me, the key to here with Niederreiter is the last season, 20 goals in 56 games, which is pretty good. That's pretty good. You like having that out of your forward, especially a guy. I think he's listed as a right winger. I think he can play either one if you were to ask him to. He's listed on the hockey database as a right winger. On CapFriendly, he's a left winger. I initially went with Jake Bean, the left-handed defender, just because, again, he's young. He's apparently he's kind of almost a, Vince Dunn light a little bit in that, he's a highly regarded puck mover, offensive generator, who hasn't quite put it together yet. Of course, in Carolina, you've had a log jam of defenders for the longest time. But I think for the same reason that they take Giordano, I think they take Niederreiter as well. At the very least, he's someone you can trade at the deadline. Plain and simple. And if he's got 25 goals by the deadline, you're going to get something nice for him. And you need those picks and you need those type of returns. So I'm going to join you, and I'm going to say Nino Niederreiter is the pick there. So at this point, we have 2 forwards and 4 defenders and no goalies.
We'll get there. It just won't be here, though, with Chicago Blackhawks.
Brett Connolly, Zach Smith, Ryan Carpenter, Vinny Hinostroza, Adam Gaudette are your top forward options there. Also, John Quinville, the son of one Joel Quinville. Is he the son, or is he? They're related somehow. I know that. Calvin DeHaan, Nikita Zadorov are your main defensive options there. And then you have your choice of Colin Delia or Malcolm Subban in net. By the way, Subban was an original Vegas Golden Knights, although I don't think he wasn't drafted by them. It was a trade, I believe, because Vegas was losing goaltenders left and right. But I digress. Chicago, who do you got?
Well, I went with a defender in this instance, and I initially gravitated to Calvin DeHaan because he has had some pretty good success. But I ended up going with Nikita Zadorov because I have heard that it seems to be the direction that Seattle might be leaning towards. Not to sit there and say he's going to be great in Seattle. He wasn't good in Colorado. He wasn't good in Chicago for the most part. But I went with Zadorov. It seems like that's the direction teams have been pushing for Seattle to take. And it may be one of those just to, once again, have an able body that has NHL experience as well. Because as we continue to go down further in this draft, teams don't have as many defensive prospects that you would want coming in there. I mean, I've got two more on my list that are decent. One a big name, one a surprising name. But I went with Zadorov in this instance.
You know, Zadorov, 6'6", 235 pounds. He was a former mid-first round pick. You know, you need big beef like that on your defense,
Yeah.
and he certainly provides that. I personally went with Adam Gaudette. You know, of course, he was with the Vancouver Canucks. He is a guy that a lot of people think could be maybe a potential William Karlsson type pick for Seattle if they go that direction. The kind of unheralded, you know, center that just explodes once he, you know, becomes a member of the Seattle Kraken. And in 7 games, he did have a goal and 3 assists for 4 points. But I have also heard the Zadorov rumors with Seattle. And quite frankly, when you put the two next to each other, I think it does make more sense for them to take Zadorov. So we'll go with Zadorov.
And look what Montreal showed this year. Look what the Blues showed a couple of years ago. What gets you to Stanley Cup Finals outside of extremely great offenses, Tampa Bay?
Defense.
You need big defenders that clear the nets and block shots. And Zadorov isn't going to be an offensive dynamo, but if he can get his defense right, he's one of those big bodies that can clear the front of the net.
Fun fact, I did wear my Baltimore Ravens Ed Reed jersey to work today because,
Defense
you know,
does win championships.
defense wins championships. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. All right, moving on to the Colorado Avalanche. Speaking of a team with a wealth of defenders, of course, the big one standing out here, Gabriel Landeskog, is exposed and available, as is Brandon Saad, which I feel would have been a bigger deal a couple of years ago. Jonas Donskoy, who has been a nice find for the Avalanche, he is exposed. He's got 2 years left on his $3.9 million deal. JT Compher, an interesting option for them. He's younger, 26 years old, has 2 years left as well at $3.5 million. Veteran Matt Calvert, Vegas Golden Knights pick Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. Who else do they have? That's pretty much it for forwards as far as interesting ones. Former St. Louis Blues first overall pick Eric Johnson is available. Patrick Nemeth is available. Dennis Gilbert available. And then goaltending wise, they can finally live out their Devin Dubnyk dreams if they want to, although he is an unrestricted free agent and he sucks. So, Colorado, who are we going?
I went with youth. I went with JT Compher. He's a guy that's kind of burst onto the scene a little bit last year. And once again, young player, has some term, has a decent contract. And he could be one of those guys that you pop on a second or third line that could make a lot of hay. And he's been good for the last couple of years. I mean, a little bit of a down year last year, but before that, he was one of their top point producers.
Not particularly. I mean, he still did get double-digit goals. Double-digit goals the last 4 years. I mean, he gets high marks, you know, for his ability to play defense as well. I mean, he's going to be kind of like, as you said, kind of a third liner for Colorado. And, yeah, you just look at him, you know, on his hockey DB, and he's a consistent producer. And I was kind of going back and forth between Compher and Donskoy, but I also went with youth as well. I think Compher would be a very good pick for them. 3
years and $4 million less. So
that is true. That is true. So, so that is Colorado. We have picked 8 of our 30 players so far. If you're watching, what do you guys think of our picks? Have we done anything too harebrained, too off the wall? Do you agree with our picks? Do you think they suck? Let us know. We will always take your feedback. The Columbus Blue Jackets. Colorado, we just did them. We have this is one of the most obvious picks, I think, of this whole thing, at least in my opinion anyway. Max Domi, Mikhail Grigorenko, who has been kind of going back and forth between the NHL and the KHL. Kevin Stenlund's a nice grinder. And that's really Ryan McInnes, son of Al McInnes, available. On defense, Dean Kukan is an interesting defensive option. Scott Harrington, Gabriel Carlson's only 24 years old. And that's really about it. Columbus, not as deep as you might expect. I personally went with Max Domi. I'm looking. Of all the players that are here, he sticks out like a sore thumb to me. He's young. He's 26 years old. He is, maybe not the, star that people thought he would be, but he's still been a pretty good producer for the past couple of years. He just keeps getting bounced around like a football. But yeah, I mean, he had an off year last year, 54 games played, 9 goals, 15 assists for 24 points. Year before that, though, he had double that output in just a few more games. This is a guy coming off a 28 goal season just a couple years ago for Montreal. Remember, he was traded for Alex Galchenyuk, and we all thought that Arizona did well getting Galchenyuk. Nope. So Domi has his detractors, but I think it's Domi. Who did you go with?
Well, once again, if he was available, if the games remaining don't matter, I actually went with Ryan McInnes, mainly just because of youth. He was this was another one of those last team picks, so it's kind of staying under the cap and getting youth and all that stuff. But I think Max Domi is the guy that they're going to go with. He, like you said, this is almost the most clear-cut choice of any of the teams available. So for me, it's Max Domi. I agree with you 100%.
All right, so that is 9 players down. We have our 4th forward. We have 5 defenders, still no goaltenders. And we have used 31 out of our $81.5 million of cap space. So we're a little ahead of the pace there, but we'll see if we can catch up here.
For me, it's going to get a lot worse.
I think this is going to be like it gets interesting here with Dallas. So Dallas Stars, you have Andrew Cogliano, you have Blake Comio. Again, this would have been a bigger deal a few years ago. Nicholas Kamano, who's only 22 years old. On defense, you have Jamie Alexiak, who is a pending unrestricted free agent. I hope he's the St. Louis Blue next year. I'm praying that he becomes the St. Louis Blue next year. We'll see about that. You have the ancient Andres Sekera available. He's 35 years old. And Julius Honka was once a prospect for Dallas, but he's kind of faded out. And then you have, waiving his no movement clause, Ben Bishop, who is being held together by ABC gum and duct tape at this point. And Colton Point, 23-year-old goaltender, and Landon Bow, a 25-year-old goaltender. I did sneak a peek at some of your picks earlier. You went Bishop here, didn't you?
I did. I went with Ben Bishop. A couple of different reasons. We thought Marc-Andre Fleury was at the end of his rope, essentially. When he was picked by Vegas, you thought he was coming in just to kind of make, get people excited about that team, bring some Penguins fans down along with him. I think this is kind of the same instance with Ben Bishop. He's coming off of injury and surgery, but he's had a whole year to rehab. He has a whole year where he did not play, so you get that on top of it. He does have a high cap hit, but once again, continuing to build up to make sure you hit that floor was part of the reason behind it as well. And as we get a little bit further along, it makes sense for me because if he's healthy, he is going to be your number one goaltender, and he can potentially do what Marc-Andre Fleury did for Vegas. If he's not healthy fully, he's a pretty good backup and somebody that you can lean on to get the younger goaltenders a little bit more experience and just get them better. So I went with Bishop. I think it's probably the right call in my mind because he's already had his surgery. Whereas you look at Carey Price, and if you go that route, you're not sure what you're going to get. He may not even play next season potentially. So at least with Bishop, you have the certainty of knowing he's had his surgery and he's got a year of rehab under his belt, and his cap hit isn't as bad.
I will admit that I went with Nicholas Kamano. Just because 22 years old, he's a 6'3", 200-pound forward, so he's got some decent size. He's shown that he can produce in the OHL, but he was just a 5th-round pick from 5 years ago already, and really hasn't done a whole heck of a lot from Texas and Dallas. So I was looking at Bishop when I made my initial picks, and I was thinking, well, they wouldn't want Bishop. They're getting Carey Price. Well, they're not. I don't think they're getting Carey Price now. So to me, Bishop could be the Marc-Andre Fleury. of this year's draft, in that, you know, he's your veteran that, you know, has played some, you know, A tier hockey back in the past, just as recently as a couple years ago. And, you know, if he plays well for you, and you know, you still feel like you need to move on, whether you get another goaltender or whatever, you'll find something for him, I think. So, I mean, granted, the goaltending market can be a little fickle, but he still is signed for 2 years at $4.9 million. If he's the Ben Bishop of old, that's a bargain.
And we haven't really seen a reason why he can't be. I mean, even in the last year he played, which was a bit of a down, he still had a 2.5 goals against average. So I think at $5 million, you take a 2.5 goals against average for 40, 45 games. And especially if you're able to platoon him with another younger goalie that could push him as well, it might be perfect for Seattle.
Absolutely. So there is our first goaltender off the board, 10 drafted, and then we have 1 goalie. So we are on our way to meeting the minimum requirements. And as part of those minimum requirements, we absolutely have to take someone from Detroit, even if we don't necessarily want to. So we have our choice of Franz Nielsen. No. Darren Helm. No. Valtteri Filppula. No. Vladislav Nemesnikov. No, not really. Luke Glendening. No. Bobby Ryan. No. Sam Gagne. No. There's a whole lot of no here. Evgeny Svechnikov, before you get excited, this isn't Andre. This is his older brother. Maybe. Mark Stahl on defense, no. Danny DeKaiser, no. Troy Stetcher, well, maybe. Christian Juice, maybe. Dennis Cholowski, who was once kind of more highly touted, but he's kind of fallen off a little bit, maybe. And then we got Jonathan Bernier and Calvin Pickard, and that's about it for the goaltenders. So you probably went cross-eyed here as well, like I did. Who did you eventually bite the bullet on?
Troy Stetcher. He's the only guy that really makes sense to me. He's the guy that a lot of people have been projecting to go to Seattle as well. $1.7 million. He's still signed for 2022 as well, so he'll be a unrestricted free agent after that. Still young, 27. He's kind of the guy in Detroit that they probably don't want to lose, but they have other guys that they had to protect outside of that. So Stetcher's probably going to be the guy for me.
Yeah, when the Red Wings took Stetcher, I was thinking maybe this would be like the exposure, guy here, because except for against the St. Louis Blues in the playoffs last year, Troy Stetcher has been just kind of okay. 5'10", 186 pounds, not particularly a great point producer, but he is a British Columbia kid, and so he would be close to home. And his cap hit's pretty reasonable. I mean, he's still inked up through next year. I went with Dennis Cholowski, though. I went with Cholowski just simply because it's the youth thing. He's 23 years old. He's a former 20th overall pick in the 2016 NHL entry draft. He's played a game of ping pong between the NHL and AHL, but I still think he's got some projectability. He's a guy that at the very least you can park in the AHL, it sounds like, and he'd probably be fine. Not every pick's going to be a winner, with this expansion draft. I mean, Vegas got lucky with Tomas Nosek. I went with Cholowski. So, first comment to anyone that's still watching or watching right now. First comment: do you go with Cholowski or do you go with Stetcher? Whoever comments next is going to be the tiebreaker, basically. I think I'm saying Cholowski because of the youth. You're saying Tyson Stetcher. By the way, I don't think there's anyone else really worth picking here between those two guys. I mean,
and the one thing, once again, going back to this is, what does the game remaining actually mean? If you don't hit the 27.54, can you be picked? So it says required to meet exposure requirements.
Yeah, you can't. I'm not entirely sure what that means either. But Cholowski's been the pick on some mock drafts that I have seen. And by the way, the comments are in. It is Troy Stetcher we will be going with for the purposes of our draft here. So it honestly, you can kind of flip a coin.
Yeah. And that might be what Seattle does.
Might be. Well, I mean, because I think they're going to get some really good defenders. as we go on here. So
Can we sponsor that coin flip?
Yeah, if anyone wants to sponsor us, please let us know. toastedSTLsports@gmail.com, Toasted St. Louis on Twitter. Shoot us a DM. We will absolutely take your message. Edmonton Oilers. No, Connor McDavid's not available. James Neal is, though, along with Alex Chason, Kyle Turris, Jujar Kyra, Dominic Cahoon, Connor Marody, and that's kind of it for them. On defense, Oscar Klefbom, who has missed, I feel like, an eternity of games. He's just been injured. Adam Larson, unrestricted free agent coming up, though. One-time St. Louis Blue Chris Russell is an option. Tyson Berry's a pending unrestricted free agent. And then they have Mikko Koskinen and his $4.5 million cap hit, along with the ageless wonder Mike Smith, who is a unrestricted free agent. And I know, Rodney, I can't believe it. The Oilers somehow protected Connor McDavid. I mean, it was either McDavid or Draisaitl, and they somehow just decided, you know what, Kyle Turris, we don't need you. I'm sure it wasn't
pretty easy for them to make that decision.
Pretty freaking easy. All right, so who did you go with?
I went with Dominic Cahoon. I heard his name a lot this past year. He's another one of those younger players, because you're going to have some youth on this team, and he'll be an arbitration eligible restricted free agent next year. So there's potential for him to be stuck around for a little while. I know you're looking at who you picked because it's Edmonton. Who remembers who we picked?
Honestly, I could not remember who I picked. But continue.
No, that's pretty much what it came. I think Cahoon is a guy that might be on the verge of breaking out a little bit. Like I said, I heard his name a lot last year. Maybe not so much on the score sheet, but it seemed like when the Blues played, or when I watched Edmonton Oilers games, he was a guy that his name came up a little bit, and he's been around over the last couple of years with a couple of different teams. So he has bounced around a little bit. Yeah. But he does have ability, and I think he's a guy that could make a pretty good difference at the price as well.
I went with Tyler Benson, former 32nd overall pick in 2016. He is 6 foot, 190 pounds, a left winger, 23 years old. And I went with him because it seems like that he can't crack the Edmonton Oilers for some reason. But just a couple seasons ago, he had 15 goals, 51 assists for 66 points in 68 games. And then just this year, he spent some time in the Swiss League, almost a point per game guy there. But then he went back to Bakersfield and was a point per game guy. 10 goals, 26 assists, 36 points in 36 games. And, with Seattle, I feel you need some guys like Tyler Benson that maybe you can let percolate in Palm Springs for a year. Or actually, I think they're partnering with someone in the AHL this year. I swear they're on the tip of my tongue. I want to say Carolina? I forget who. But they had to go. Palm Springs isn't going to be ready yet for their AHL affiliate yet. So next comment, Tyler Benson or Dominic Cahoon. Who would you go with? Cahoon, 26 years old, good bottom six guy, reliable, can score a little bit. He's an underappreciated guy. Or do you go with the youth in Tyler Benson? Legit interested in seeing, because I'm kind of at I can go either way.
And it's Charlotte that they're going to be with, sharing with Florida.
Charlotte sharing with Florida. That's right. So who do you got, Cahoon or Benson? Next comment. Of course, with StreamYard, it's delayed a little bit. So I'm, screaming into nothingness right now. Probably my original message may just be hitting YouTube. Benson. Rodney Hale says, go with Tyler Benson. Go with the youth. So for our purposes, we will go ahead and take Tyler Benson. But honestly, I could see that going either way as well. Florida Panthers. This is like the one team that I've heard something really solid on as far as where Seattle could go. And it's kind of a surprise to me a little bit, honestly. But you have the likes of Frank Vetrano available. Alex Wenberg is an unrestricted free agent. Noel Achari, who I think is still picking himself off the ice from getting tripped in the Stanley Cup final. Lucas Walmark, Patrick Boshkov is available. On defense, Anton Strawman, Brandon Montour, Rodko Gudis is who I would pick if I didn't feel like I already know who they're going with, and that is goaltender Chris Driedger, who is an unrestricted free agent, but he played pretty darn well when Bobrovsky was having his moments of doubts and shame. So I went with Driedger just because apparently that's the direction they're going.
And that's exactly what I went with as well. And that's another reason why I was able to pick a Ben Bishop as well, because I think he can do well. Like you said, he did well in relief of, Bobrovsky, played very, very well. I mean, the 14-7-3 record is pretty good. So, he definitely showed what he can do. And if Bishop isn't ready or can't play at the level that he did, I think you've got a good guy that can take that number one spot. And if he doesn't need to be the number one, he's a good backup, as he showed this past year as well.
Yeah, I think around the league, Driedger is kind of looked at as a possible 1A, 1B type of a situation, because even though he had really low goals against average, just over 2, he did only play 23 games. I mean, so it was you still wanting to maybe want to see more of him, but Seattle can probably sign him at a very reasonable cap number. So I would say that would be actually, when you look at it, not a bad pick if they are confident that they can sign him. So we have our second goalie in the books. Now on to the Los Angeles Kings. Brandon Lemieux, Andreas Atanasiou, Austin Wagner, Blake Lizotte. I'm not even going to try that one. And then on defense, Oli Mata, Christian Wolanin, Curtis McDermott. Stop laughing at me because I'm not going to – I can't – okay, fine. Bokanji Amama.
Hey, that sounds like it's pretty close.
Yeah, it sounds like something you say when you're having really bad stomach pains.
That's what I was saying last week. I'll tell you that much.
Oh, man. We'll talk afterwards. And then, of course, they exposed Jonathan Quick, who I don't think Seattle will be quick to take. So
he's broken.
He's pretty much broken at this point. So who did you go with?
I went with Blake Lizotte. He's a rising star in this league. He had 10 points last year in 41 games. He had a breakout season the year before with the 6 goals, 17 assists. He's another one of those kind of depth guys that will be able to slide in and out of the lineup, I think, but can also provide a lot when he's in there. He's also young. So another young player as well that Seattle may be able to grow with. So I went with Lizotte. I think he's a guy that you're going to hear a lot of, whether he sticks with the Kings or not. He's going to be a guy to watch out for.
Yeah, I went with Lizotte as well. I mean, I don't think he's going to be like a superstar. I mean, he's only 5'7", which, teams might shy away from just a little bit, but he has produced in the NHL a little bit. I mean, he's at least probably a third or fourth line center at this point, maybe with upside to be, a second or third, at least on a team like Seattle. I think that would be a very prudent pick. And again, a guy that's, if he, doesn't make the team out of camp, you can probably park him in the AHL, let him get some grooming there, and more youth to cultivate. So Lizotte is both our picks from the LA Kings. Minnesota Wild. This is an interesting one.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting one. You have Marcus Johansson, who's an unrestricted free agent. Nick Bonino's unrestricted free agent. Victor Rask. More on him in just a bit. Nick Bukestad is an unrestricted free agent next year. You have 22-year-old Mason Shaw, 23-year-old Will Bitton, 23-year-old Dmitry Sokolov. You have a lot of youth there. You also have Ian Cole, who is an unrestricted free agent. Carson Soucy, who I've seen a lot, in mock drafts being picked by the Seattle Kraken. Former Blues legend Brett Hunt is available, unrestricted free agent. And my pick, Kaapo Kähkönen. Kähkönen was, for a stretch this year, was absolutely nails.
Yep.
For Minnesota. He was really good, and he was only 20, and he's 24 years old. And in the original draft that I did, I had him as basically the backup for Carey Price. Price and Kähkönen was my tandem. When you look at his stats overall, though, I know he kind of fell off a cliff a little bit. So you have to wonder if maybe that, little bit of a boost was a mirage. But I don't think he's someone that Minnesota necessarily wants to see go. You're just not going to, after the season Talbot had, you're not going to expose him. So I'm curious, who did you go with?
I mean, I went with Nick Bukestad, another one of those younger players, a better cap hit than a Victor Rask. I think it might come down to Rask or Bukestad. I think that might be the play. And honestly, Minnesota may have to make a deal with Seattle to not let them take Kaukkonen because, like I said, it's 24. He did have some good numbers, and you really probably didn't want to expose him. So this might be the case where Minnesota has to make a deal and get Seattle to pick one of these forwards in order to, keep Kaukkonen. And like you said, Soucy's another guy that could potentially go as well. So maybe it is a first-round pick, and you say, hey, we'll trade you that for you taking a forward, because I don't think they can really lose anything on defense either. I mean, I was a little surprised that they protected Matt Dumba. I thought maybe he was on his way out. There's been trade rumors with him. But I don't think they can afford to lose any of these younger defenders. So I think this is that point where Minnesota's probably going to have to make a deal.
This was a team, when I saw this, I also agreed with you in that this is a team that seems ripe for a deal. And there's a couple reasons. Number one, there's some intriguing options. Bukestad, I think, would be a consideration. Absolutely. I mean, this is a guy that's 6'6", 280 pounds. He is a proven producer of the NHL, although his play has kind of trailed off in recent years. Carson Soucy's a popular pick. And, of course, you mentioned Kaukkonen as well. But I also think that Minnesota will be willing to give up a pick to get rid of Victor Rask, because since that trade went down, it was Nino Niederreiter for Victor Rask. That has been a terrible deal for Minnesota. Rask has been pretty awful. And I think Minnesota fans would be more than happy to drive Rask up to the airport and put him on a one-way ticket to Seattle, never to return again.
I can see that being the case as well.
So, but that being said, I went with Kaukkonen, but I know we're kind of looking at this draft a little differently. So I'll go with your Bukestad pick. I'll go. I can definitely see that. I mean, Bukestad, you can't go. He's a solid middle six center for them, and he has a reasonable cap hit, and he's a guy that you could possibly trade for an asset. So.
Yeah, and we're getting closer to possibly adding a couple of big priced players here in the next couple of picks. So another one of those, the money, the $2 million difference between Rask and Bukestad might also play into that as well.
We are halfway through this, 15 out of 30 drafted so far, $42 million in our cap hit out of 81, so we're fairly on track there. 7 forwards and 6 defenders picked and 2 goalies. All right. Here's the $10.5 million question. Who do the Montreal Canadiens pick? You have Jonathan Drouin. You have, Totter's a free agent. Paul Byron. No, you're probably not going to take Paul Byron. And I really don't see any other forward that they would reasonably pick. On defense, you have Shea Weber, who is broken. You have Brent Kulak, who is a very underrated, interesting option, I think, for a team like Seattle. Cale Fleury, who is 22 years old. And then you have, of course, the big tamale in Carey Price. I went with Carey Price in my draft, but with the stuff about his hip coming out and the fact that, Montreal can't launder money, I think that was purposely done to dissuade Seattle from taking Carey Price. I think Montreal underestimated how much interest Seattle would have in him. It's almost like they forgot that he was a Pacific Northwest kid and played for Tri-City. It was just the whole situation. We talked about it earlier. It's weird. I'm going to ask you first. Who do you have?
I went with Jonathan Drouin. You need a guy that has scoring punch. It's been down a little bit the last 2 years, but 53 points with Tampa in his last season there, 46 and then 53 again with Montreal. He's a guy that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, but he has the ability to be a 20-goal scorer. And we talk again about what Vegas did with second and third line players that may have to play top line minutes, but you got that stigma on your back of being a guy that was exposed and you're going to go out and try and prove something. He could have a bounce back year in Seattle. He's still relatively young as well. He's still just 26 years old, which is crazy. It seems like he's been in the league forever, but he just needs to stay healthy. and he just needs the right partner alongside of him. And I think he could do really, really well in Seattle. So I went with Druin.
Of course, this could have been a St. Louis Blue Jonathan Drouin if Kevin Shattenkirk weren't such a baby during the with his no trade clause, because that deal was going to happen. It was going to be Shattenkirk for Drouin. And Shattenkirk said, no, I want to play with the Rangers. Well, look how well that worked out for you.
He did get to take the cup back to New York and screw the Rangers over by holding it in front of Madison Square Garden. So, I mean,
that's true. That's true. I guess that's worth its weight in something, I guess. But regardless, I'm also going to go with Drouin here. Now that I'm not taking Carey Price. I mean, this is a guy that, and assuming his personal issues are okay, which we've heard nothing about, really, it's been like oddly quiet, but I don't think anyone's too concerned with them. But this is a guy that is an absolute poet with the puck at times. I mean, he can be absolutely magical with it. He's 26 years old. You get him for 2 years to see if there's anything there. And if not, well, I think it's a worthy lottery ticket for Seattle to see if there is something there. He goes into their top 6 right away. And it's one of those situations where I think Seattle fans will be very happy taking Drouin, and I think Montreal Canadiens fans will be happy if Seattle takes Drouin away from them. It's just he's one of those players that can be a little bit maddening. But for a team like Seattle, it makes sense. So 16 out of 30 in the books. We go on to Nashville, who have, if you need a high-priced center, this is your place to go.
Is there any other direction, though?
With Nashville, no. Matt Duchene, $8 million per until 2026. Good luck with that. Ryan Johansson, $8 million per until 2025. Good luck with that. Mikhail Granlund, if you like unrestricted free agents. Colton Sissons, $2.8 million until 2026. You have Kalle Järnkrok. You have Rocco Grimaldi. And I think for forwards, that's basically it. On defense, Eric Goodbranson, you're not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Mark Borowiecki, who has one more year at $2 million. And then you can try to convince Pekka Rinne to not go into retirement or take 24-year-old Connor Ingram if a goalie is your direction here. Which way are you going?
Matt Duchene. He's a guy that still may have something left in the tank. He had a down year last year, but he did put up 42 points his first year in Nashville. It's another one of those. Cap hit will help continue to raise that up there for them to be productive. And once again, he's another guy that, you may have to eat some of the salary, but a guy that you might be able to move at the deadline as well. But I think he's going to be the guy that needs to anchor this team. You can make an argument for Johansson, but I don't think he's got the pedigree. I mean, Duchene had a lot in Colorado. He was a big star player. And I see you highlighting Colton Sissons as well. He's a guy that, he could do some damage, but you're going to sit there and tell me that you want your top forward right now. Your top forward is going to be Jonathan Drouin. So you need somebody with that star power up at the top, because you're gonna have Jonathan Drouin and Nino Niederreiter is probably your top 2 forwards at this point right now. You need another name, and you need another guy that can put up points. And I think Duchene will be great by going over to Seattle. That's just the way I see it.
That's a provocative pick because, Duchene has obviously not lived up to his contract in Nashville. I don't think Columbus fans are over enamored with him when they got him from Ottawa, but he did play well in Ottawa. So that's and that's very recent. That's 2018-19. So gosh, though, that contract, $8 million though until 2026. I went with Sissons. I mean, he's not flashy, he's not exciting, but he's a solid, kind of a, middle 6 type of a forward who has, kind of like almost like an Oscar Sundqvist type of a deal, where he's got about 2.8 mil and for the next few years. He's only 27 years old as well, so you're kind of counting on him to be, part of the franchise for a while. But Matt Duchene. Fuck it, Matt Duchene. You know what?
I mean, either it's going to be great for Seattle, or because we're in the Western Conference, it's awesome for the Blues because Seattle has to be settled with that contract.
Or Nashville does give up a pick for them to take Duchene. That could also happen as well because Nashville has needs this offseason. So, all right, Matt Duchene it is. Living large. New Jersey Devils. This one, you might be surprised by my pick on this one. You have Andreas Johansson, Nick Merkley, Marian Stadenik, and then on defense, you have PK Subban, Ryan Murray, Will Butcher, Connor Carrick. Interesting defensive options, and no one really that interesting unless you're a big Scott Wedgwood fan in goal. Who did you go with for New Jersey?
So we talked about this last week about marketability and the current climate up in Seattle, about what they're all about as far as inclusivity and all that kind of stuff. And I went with PK. I think he's a guy that you can market. I think you can sell a lot of jerseys. I think you can do a lot of stuff around hockey, outside of the hockey arena. And that seems to be what Seattle's all about, is all of that stuff outside of the game as well. Honestly, Johansson might have been a pretty good pick. I think that might be a direction they go. But if you want to make a splash immediately with jersey sales, with someone that is well-spoken and can really articulate what it means to play up in Seattle and what it's all about, I think you go with PK. And it's another one of those, the cap hit also helps you as well. If you want to skew younger on some other aspects, it allows you to get to that minimum spot. And he is only signed through 2022. So it's not like you're saddled with him for a long time, but he could be a really, really good ambassador for Seattle as well.
Yeah, you get him for 1 year, you sell some jerseys with Subban on the back, and you get to proclaim that you're diverse, with your hires, which they've already kind of proclaimed that already with a lot of their hires already. And, of course, we're not saying that's a bad thing at all. I mean, obviously, more diversity is good. I think just from a marketing standpoint, I think Subban makes sense. I had one fan call me crazy for suggesting that they would take Subban without taking a pick, but it's only 1 year. It is only 1 year, and then say he does well for you, and maybe he resigns, for half that. I mean, you still got PK Subban, so that has value in of itself for a team like Seattle. Plus, no one else on New Jersey was like really that intriguing to me. I mean, Will Butcher kind of. But even still, he almost makes $4 million per, and he's only got 1 more year left himself. I mean, Nick Merkley was kind of considered highly touted at one point. He's okay. Janssen, of course, is an interesting name, but yeah, it's got to be Subban. I think it's got to be Subban for Seattle. It just makes too much sense from on and off ice reasons. New York Islanders. So, got more interesting options here if you're if Seattle wants to have a scoring forward. Jordan Eberle is available, Josh Bailey, Casey Cizikas, who's a free agent though, Leo Komarov is available, Richard Panik, who just got traded from Detroit, Kiefer Bellows, interesting young forward prospect for them. On defense, you have Thomas Hickey and Braden Coburn. Coburn's a pending free agent. Sebastian Aho is also available. Not that Sebastian Aho, but the lesser Sebastian Aho, who was actually not bad in his own right. And Corey Schneider, if Seattle's feeling insane. So I personally, on this one, went with Kiefer Bellows just for the youth angle and for, this is. I mean, you have some interesting options here. I don't think though that I don't think Eberle's gonna twist Seattle's arm. I don't think Bailey's gonna twist Seattle's arm, and outside of that, that's no one else really kind of jumps out at me. I mean, yeah. I went with Bellows.
I went with Bellows as well, number 19 overall in the 2016 NHL entry draft. He hasn't had a whole lot of success at the NHL level, just 3 points each of the last 2 seasons, but he is a guy that's a bit physical. I mean, yes, he's 6 foot, 195 pounds. He had 101 penalty minutes with Bridgeport back in 2018-19, so he's not afraid to play rough, but he's played decent at the NHL level. So I think he's one of those guys that, you could probably put him down in the AHL to season him up a little bit if you need to, but he's also a guy that maybe just needs a change of scenery, and boom, he's back up and ready to go.
I look at Bellows, and there's 41 goals with the Portland Winterhawks in 2017-18. His lone year in the WHL. 2 years later, he follows it up with 22 goals in 52 games with Bridgeport. I think there's a goal scorer here waiting to come out with Kiefer Bellows. If you're talking about your William Karlsson type of players that could break out suddenly, I think Kiefer Bellows is the guy. I think there is a reason why in most, if not all, mock drafts I have seen, Bellows has been the pick.
Yep.
It just makes too much sense. New York Rangers.
Barf.
Before we get to the Rangers, my friend Tim forwarded me a tweet from Frank Cervelli that Barclay Goodrow is about ready to sign a extension with the Rangers. They traded for him from Tampa and exposed him in the draft, but apparently he's about to sign a new contract with the Rangers probably after the expansion draft is done. So he's available for the Kraken if they want, but again, pending UFA. Julian Gauthier, a 23-year-old right winger. Ty Ronning, a 23-year-old right winger. Tim Gettinger, a 23-year-old left winger, is available. You have Anthony DeAngelo.
Yeah, if you're going to talk about inclusivity and you're going to pick PK Subban, you're not picking Tony DeAngelo.
Could you imagine? Just imagine DeAngelo in Seattle. Just
you would have ready-made debates, though. I mean, that would be must-see TV, possibly.
They might bring back the gallows in the town square for this guy. That he would be loved that much. I'm gonna guess that's not the pick. I'm gonna guess that's not happening. And Keith Kincaid's a decent backup goalie, and yeah, the Rangers don't have much here, do they?
No, I literally just threw a dart at the board and landed on Philip DiGiuseppe. That's where it landed, so that's who I went with. I mean, Julian Gauthier, though, might be the pick because he is young, good cost control for another year or so. Like 23 years old, and he's exposed in this draft. So
former first round pick, 21st overall in 2016. That was my pick, just simply because, hey, he's a former first round pick and he's under 25.
Yeah, and you got him for good money.
That is literally the reason I picked Gauthier. So I think I think let's go with Gauthier on this one here.
I agree.
Yeah, and we're not talking about the singer either. We're talking about the right winger. So not somebody that you used to know. We are 20 picks into this 30-player draft here, so we are 2/3 of the way in here. We have spent $66 million of our $81.5 million cap. We have $15 million to play with. We have 11 forwards, 7 defenders, 2 goalies, and a partridge in a pear tree. Ottawa Senators, Derek Stepan, unrestricted free agent, probably not. Evgeny Dadonov, $5 million, 32 years old, 2 years left, probably not. Artem Anisimov, unrestricted free agent, nope. Chris Tierney, probably not. Ryan Dzingel, no. Then you have youngsters, Jonathan Davidson, Zachary Magwood, Jack Kopaka, Vitaly Abramov. On defense, you have Joshua Brown. Goaltending, you have Matt Murray. And then you have Joey Decord. And that's about it. I honestly forget who I took, so tell me who you took while I research who I took.
I went with Logan Shaw, mainly because you need a guy of age that you can put at the top of your AHL team and potentially, develop some guys. He's not going to make a huge impact at the NHL level. I mean, he has a handful of games. He played with Winnipeg in 2019, 2020, got 5 points in 35 games, but he's an avid AHL guy. And I think that he's the one that you probably want to go with as far as putting at the top of your AHL team. But once again, this is another one where you can kind of almost throw a dart at the lineup and go with whoever it lands on, essentially, as far as the young kids are concerned.
That's basically what I did. I mean, and I went with Abramov just simply because of the under 25s here. He was the highest picked, and he was only a third rounder. So we'll go with Shaw. I think you're
either or.
You're right. Honestly, who cares? But I think to your point, I think you're kind of right in that your AHL team needs some veteran presence, and why not Logan Shaw? I'm trying. Next pick, the Philadelphia Flyers. We were talking about some interesting possible trade happenings going on with them. Jakub Voracek, $8.25 million for the next 3 years at 31 years old. James Van Riemsdyk, $7 million per for the next 2. 23-year-old German Rupsov. You have Pascal LeBerge. I think that guy's made up. Carson Tworinsky, another made-up guy. Connor Bunneman, I don't know who he is. And then you have actually Samuel Morin at 26. He's a left winger who can also play defense. So he's kind of interesting. Also an unrestricted free agent, so probably won't happen. Shane Gostisbehere leads off the defenseman, signed for another 2 more years at 4.5 per, 28 years old. Justin Braun, he's 34 and got 1 more year left at 1.8. Robert Hagg, 1.6 mil for another year. Our old friend Derek Pouliot.
There you go.
Oh, no. Our old friend Brian Elliott. No. Although if the Blues have some spare money and want to upgrade on Husso, come home, bro. I'd be okay with that. So, who did you go with? I'm really curious.
Okay, so it seems like Philadelphia was really trying to push Robert Hagg on Seattle. They obviously with the Tarasenko rumors, if that happens, it would be more so for them to pick Hagg. I don't think they want to lose Shane Gostisbehere, but that's who I'm going with. He's a guy that he dropped off a little bit in 2019-20. He had a bit of a bounce back year last year, 20 points in 41 games. His defense has gotten better as he's gotten older, and he's a guy that you can sit there and probably pair with either a Subban or a Giordano and be the guy that kind of pushes that defensive pairing forward while the other guy kind of steps back. It almost like a Jabo Pietrangelo, Jabo Parayko kind of pairing where you have a younger player. It's a little bit of offensive upside that can pop up into the play and not necessarily have to worry about playing defense, but does have a good defensive game as well. So I went with Gostisbehere.
Yeah, Gostisbehere I also went with as well. I mean, remember, he was available for free this past season. He was waived at one point, but because of the COVID cap, no one bit. But this is a guy that can produce points for you on offense. He kind of came off as a house on fire. I mean, he was only a 3rd-round pick. But then, he had that 1 year in 17-18 where he had 13 goals and 52 assists, and you're thinking, holy crap, this is going to be a franchise-level defenseman that's going to quarterback our power play for years to come. And then he kind of leveled off a little bit, so almost like an offensive version of Joel Edmondson a little bit. But I think if you're Seattle and you're looking at Gost right there, he's still a fine offensive defenseman. And at $4.5 million, you can probably swing that. So, although we are getting kind of tied up to the cap hit here, so we only have about just under $10 million left to play with, and we have drafted 22 of 30. So, we'll see how the rest of the way goes here. Pittsburgh, you have Jason Zucker, Brandon Tanev, Colton Sevier, Zach Aston Reese, Sam Lafferty, who I think was one of the golfers in Happy Gilmore. On defense, you have Marcus Pettersson, Cody Ceci. How about No? And in goal, you have Casey DeSmith and Maxime Lagasse, not Legacy. No relation to former Blues goaltender Manny Legacy. Who did you go with?
Well, I could see them taking a Casey DeSmith potentially, maybe. But I ended up going with Zach Aston Reese. He's one of those guys, another depth player. Yes, he's gotten a chance to play with Sidney Crosby, so that helps a little bit. But he's a guy that can put some pucks in the net from that 4th line, and I think that's the way they go. And once again, because you are getting close to that cap top, a $1 million contract. He's a restricted free agent, so it may not be a whole lot more than that. It's a good deal for a guy that can get you upwards of 20 points a season.
Yeah, absolutely. I went with Marcus Pettersson, but my cap situation was a little rosier than this draft is turning out to be. I mean, at 25 years old, I mean, with term, I mean, this is a guy that you may think that, hey, could be probably a top 4 guy for you. But again, we're kind of, we don't have the money. So, and Zach Aston Reese is also a good pick, and he probably won't make too much more than the $1 million that he got. So we'll go with Aston Reese here, just because we're poor. The San Jose Sharks, another one of those teams that's like, oh God. First of all, in goal, you can have Martin Jones.
Yeah, you want a Swiss cheese block for 5.75? Okay.
Yeah, Marty Jones. No, that's not gonna happen. No one of note on defense, like no one that like I'm looking at. I'm like just no. And then on offense, you have Ryan Donato, 25 years old, Marcus Sorensen, Maxime Latunov, Dylan Gambrell might be an interesting option. I went with Donato, but I'm looking at Gambrell. And I'm thinking that might be the way to go. But what did you go with?
I went with Matt Nieto, another one of those guys that has a good term. He's a little bit older, but Dylan Gambrell is another one of those guys that you look and go, he's got good term, he's got a good age, he's definitely been a little bit on the rise the last year or so as well. Played well against the Blues in the Stanley Cup playoffs too. So I could see them going with a guy like Dylan Gambrell. So I went with Nieto, but I think more than likely it's going to be Gambrell.
If I were Seattle, I would go with Gambrell as well. I mean, he is, as you said, he's younger. I mean, he's probably not going to be more than a third line center, but that's fine. I mean, what do you guys think if you're watching right now? Next comment, Gambrell or Matthew Nieto or someone else? Do you go with Donato like I did? I actually went with Ryan Donato. But who would you take from Seattle? We'll open it up to our viewers right now. Next comment is the pick. Is it going to be Gambrell? Is it going to be Matt Nieto? Or is it going to be Ryan Donato? Or are you insane and are going to make us pick Martin Jones? Which, I mean, I don't know. I might have to overrule you on that one if you do tell us to take Martin Jones.
We wouldn't be able to pick anybody from the last 5 teams.
Yeah, we're gonna be like taking all kids essentially that we've never heard of, for the rest of the way. So next, by the way, next team is the Blues, by the way. So we'd probably give them just Jacob Delarose just because he wouldn't count against the cap. You just get
Rodney
Jones. No, we're not going to tolerate that kind of behavior. No, it will not be Marty Jones.
Go with Gambrell.
We're going with Gambrell. All right, I'm overruling just for that. We're taking Gambrell. This is a civil podcast, not a loony bin. All right, the moment is here. St. Louis Blues. Vladimir Tarasenko's out there. Jaden Schwartz is out there. Tyler Bozak, Mike Hoffman, Zach Sanford. Please be Sanford. Samuel Blais, Kyle Clifford, Mackenzie McEachern. On defense, Marco Scandella, Vince Dunn, Robert Bortuzzo, Nico Mikkola, Jake Wallman, and then in goal, Ville Husso, and that unearthed gem known as John Gillies. So, who do you got?
All right, so I threw a big curveball when I made my pick for the Blues because we talked earlier about big defensemen that can clear the net. I actually had them picking Nico Mikkola because he's a big defender and he has some upside. But for the purposes of this draft and where we're kind of at financially and things of that nature, and knowing the teams that are coming up still, rumors were that Ron Francis was very enamored with Ville Husso when he was up for draft. He was actually the Blues picked him 2 picks ahead of when Francis was projecting to pick him with Carolina, and we're still needing a third goaltender. And the Blues are going to have to probably upgrade at that position anyway. And for the sake of this draft, I would go with Ville Husso.
Ville Husso. See, I was going to go with Zach Sanford.
Well, I know we all want to go with Zach Sanford. We all want to go with him. But, I mean, it makes sense, yes. But once again, Husso is under contract at $750,000. He's a guy that Ron Francis does like. And that's, we talked about that last year when we thought Justin Falk would be a guy that we should expose as well before he started bouncing back. What does Ron Francis see? Does he want a guy like a Ville Husso, someone that he liked and has seen now play at the NHL level? Does they go that route? I picked Nico Mikkola once again because of the size. I totally get the Zach Sanford comp as well. We want Zach Sanford out of here. He is 26. He does have room to grow. He is a restricted free agent. So, that's. I mean, you have to look at it too. Who's left? Are we going to pick a goaltender from Toronto, Tampa, Vancouver, Washington, or Winnipeg?
Just anyone but Zach Sanford. Please don't take our elite forward, Zach Sanford. Please, Seattle. No, don't. Please, I beg you. No. my pick would be Vince Dunn. I would love to say just take Tarasenko, but you know what happens? Watch this up here. When we take Tarasenko, oh shoot, we only got a $500,000 cap space left.
And 4 teams or 5 teams to pick still.
Because someone wanted Matt Duchene.
Hey, you could have overruled.
I could have, but it's almost crazy enough to believe. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to say Vince Dunn. I'm going to say that the temptation is going to be too much for Seattle, and at the very least, they can flip them. I mean, at the very least, because we have hit our 9 defender limit here, but you almost convinced me on Villiahuso, but I'm going to go with Vince Dunn. I'm just trying to give the Blues as many options of trading and bringing in more stuff. So if you can get rid of Villiahuso, still trade Dunn, still trade Tarasenko, and keep Mikkola. That's probably the best outlook for the Blues if that's the way things fall out. Yeah. By the way, Derek says Tarasenko over Duchene, which is basically what we're kind of looking at this point.
Yeah.
Do you still want to stick with Duchene?
Oh, we'll go back up to Nashville. Who are you going to take from Nashville then?
My pick originally was Colton Sissons. I could also see Calle Yarncroke, although he's only got 1 year left.
You can change. Go ahead and change it to Sissons then. But this is this is of the mindset that Tarasenko is going to stick in Seattle, because are you going to have now Jakub Voracek in the trade to Philadelphia being the face of your forward organization, because you're still at this point now Jonathan Drouin will be your top guy.
Apparently that's what they're thinking about. That's the rumor. So
I mean,
I'm going to say Sissons. And I'm going to
go with Tarasenko.
I'm going to go with Vlad. I think that's the move. I think that might be the way Seattle's leaning. That's just going off of what we know.
Oh yeah, totally.
So,
and not knowing about any of the other picks too.
But it is fun. But it is fun to think about Matt Duchene, though. That's interesting.
Nashville is probably begging Seattle to take a Matt Duchene.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Here's another team that I see a trade potentially happening with, Tampa Bay. They have Andre Palat available 1 more year at 5.3. Yanni Gourde at 5.1 mil for another 4 years, if I can count correctly. 4 years. Tyler Johnson, the native of Seattle, at a few more years at 5 mil. I think he's got 3 left. Alex Killorn, 2 years left at 4.4. Blake Coleman, who's an unrestricted free agent. Low-key, a guy I wouldn't mind the Blues taking a stab on. Coleman, underrated, and he just produces. Pat Maroon, available for Seattle.
They won a cup their first year.
They could. Boris Kachuk, Tyler Radish, some young forwards there. Otto Sampi, don't know him. And then Matthew Joseph's another one I've seen kind of speculated as a possible Seattle pick. On defense, Jan Ruda, 1 more year left before he's a free agent, 1.3 mil. Cal Foote at 22 years of age. I think he's a former first rounder too. That might be an option for Seattle, and they're probably not taking any of the goalies. So ultimately, who did you go with?
So in my draft, I ended up going with Yanni Gourde. I think he's the guy that makes the most sense, but for the purposes of our draft, because that would put us at 80 mil. I think, Cal Foote would definitely be a really, really good pick. Young guy, 22, like you said, good term. He's a restricted free agent, so you can kind of negotiate there a little bit. I think Foote would be the guy that they would go with if they're in this situation, and if this is the way they have to draft alphabetically.
Yeah, which is not the way they're going to have to draft, but that's the way we're doing it because we like making things intentionally difficult. Yay! So we have 27, 20, 29, 4 more picks left to go. We have $5 million to play with. We have hit our minimum for forwards. We have hit our minimum for defenders.
So do we go through and find a goalie first from these 4 teams?
You know what? I'm willing to jump ahead. So with Toronto, your choices are Freddie Anderson, David Riddick, and Michael Hutchinson. With Vancouver, you have Braden Holtby. You have with Washington Capitals, who was my pick for goaltending, Vitek Vanacek, Phoenix Copley, Craig Anderson, or Zachary Fucale. Or with Winnipeg, you have Laurent Brossoit, Eric Comrie, Cole Keller, and Mikhail Burden. I went with Vanacek.
Yeah, Vanacek has to be it.
He's cheap. He's young. He was the number one goaltender effectively for the Capitals for much of this past season, and he did okay. He was fine. He held his own. So, and if you're looking for a 1A, 1B with Dreger, I think that you could do a lot worse than Vanacek.
Yep, I agree.
So Vanacek is our goalie, and yay, we still have money. So
not much, but some.
Not much. So let's go to Toronto. You have Alexander Kerfoot, two more years at $3.5 million per, only 26 years old. So this one's kind of surprised me. Jared McCann, who the Toronto Maple Leafs just traded from Pittsburgh for a third-round pick, they exposed him. 25 years old, left winger, productive, restricted free agent after next season, makes just a shade under $3 million. Riley Nash, who is 32 years old, he's a free agent. Zach Hyman, a free agent. Wayne Simmons, 2 more years, $1.5 million, but he's really slowed down. Nick Foligno's a free agent. Alex Galchenyuk is nothing. And then let's see here. You can go with Joe Thornton or Jason Spezza and make Jason Spezza retire early because he said he'll only play for the Leafs or he'll retire. So if you're really sick of seeing Jason Spezza, you just draft him and it's done. On defense, you have the only one option there. That's Travis Dermott, 24-year-old left-handed defender. And then the aforementioned Freddie Anderson, David Riddick, and Michael Hutchinson, Hydra of Toronto fans love. So I went with Dermott here.
Same.
McCann's interesting in that he's for what he offers, he's been very productive. He's only 25. But Dermott, you have 24 years old. You have him under team control for a couple more years.
At a good price.
And he's proven he can play at the NHL level. So yep. I think Dermott's an easy one there. I think it really is. Easy one. 2 more teams. Vancouver. You can have Louis Eriksson. You're probably not taking Louis Eriksson. No. You can have Brandon Sutter, who's an unrestricted free agent, so you don't even want him anyway. Sven Berchi, who is also an unrestricted free agent, and I think he was playing in the AHL all season last year. Jay Beagle, no. Antoine Roussel, probably not. Jake Virtanen, maybe. Cole Lind at 22, you have available. And Jonah Gadjevic, 22-year-old left winger. Defense, Alex Edler's an unrestricted free agent. Hamanek's an unrestricted free agent. Madison Bowie is 26 years old, right-handed defender. Guillaume Brisebois is a 23-year-old left-handed defender. And then you have Braden Holtby, Captain America, in goal for you. So who did you take from Vancouver?
I went with Zach McEwing, 25-year-old center, restricted free agent, good term. He's played at the NHL level, but he's also a guy that you can stick back down in the AHL as well. But once again, just kind of like a couple of these other teams, any of these younger guys, maybe higher draft picks that are exposed, I could definitely see them taking it with the intent of putting them in the AHL and letting them season up a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, you're at a point now where you can kind of just be choosy, I guess, in a sense of who you really want to go with. So any of these 3 guys are ones that I can see them taking.
I went with Jonah Gadjevic just because, I mean, for when he's 22, he was a second-round pick in 2017, and he has shown signs that he might be able to play at the next level. He had 15 goals in 19 games for Utica last season, playing alongside some St. Louis Blues because Utica had to be our life raft after spring.
How it worked this year.
Exactly. I mean, it wasn't ideal, and of course, as usual, that means we're bouncing around the AHL with our. That's Blues hockey for you. That's Blues hockey. I personally went with Gadjevic. I considered Cole Lind as well, who was had some limited action this past season, but was a point per game guy in Utica. But I don't think he quite has the track record that Gadjevic had.
No, so I think Gadjevic would be a good pick.
Yeah, so we'll go with Gadjevic here. And then our final pick from Winnipeg. Is it going to be Paul Stastny? No, probably not. Matthew Perreault? Probably not.
No.
Mason Appleton? Maybe. Skylar McKenzie and Marco Dano. That's really it for forwards. Dylan DeMello, interesting defense option for a lot of people like him for Seattle. You have the lesser Ben brother, Jordy Ben, who's an unrestricted free agent. Nathan Bulio, who's got one more year at 1.25 mil. Luke Green, 23 years old. Sammy Niku, who is seems like a defender that's waiting for a breakout for Winnipeg. He could be an interesting pick. I don't think they take a goaltender from Winnipeg. So who'd you go with?
I went with Appleton. Big
Same.
Breakout season this year, 25 points, 56 games. I think if he's available, he's a guy that you're going to want on your team. And this is a guy 6th round draft pick. We've seen guys that low do very, very well in the league, especially when they do have a breakout season. And he had some good seasons in 18, 19, 19, 20 as well. So it's not like he had one season and you're like, okay, what's going to happen? He's been building to this, and he showed it this year in a decently weak Canadian division, but I think he's going to be able to prove himself, and I like to see him in the Kraken uniform.
All right. We have drafted all 30 players. Appleton was my pick as well. I think and that would be a very good pick for Seattle to make. He probably makes our top 4 right off the bat as well. Yeah. We have 30 out of 30 drafted. Our draft is done. We have 17 forwards, 10 defenders. We have hit our minimum 3 goaltenders. We have 24 out of 20, 21, 22 contracts. It's a lot of 2s in there. We have exactly $80 million for our cap hit. So we were able to squeak under with just about $1.5 million to spare. So, and then if you look at our video version, you can see the ultimate roster that we ended up taking. I'll scroll down for a little bit, and then we'll get to period 3, which is going to be really quick because we were already gone 2 hours because we're just a bunch of chatty Cathys here. But we will go ahead and try to assemble a lineup out of this. You see if you're watching the video version. So let's go ahead and get to period number 3. All right, we're going to make a lineup out of all these players here. So first up, Vladimir Tarasenko, probably your first line right winger, correct?
Yep, agreed.
All right, so we'll go ahead and plug him into the JFresh lineup builder here, which, by the way, you can get yourself if you become a patron of JFresh, which I highly recommend because he's constantly updating his cards. And we've had him on when we were Blue Notes before, and he is extremely knowledgeable about the analytics side of hockey. So good guy, too. So I would recommend becoming a member of JFresh's Patreon. Going back to our roster here, Jonathan Drouin. Do you want him on the other side of Tarasenko?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So Jonathan Drouin, give him the first line honors. If I can type. DROU. There you go. All right. So that's decent. And then in between, your center options are Max Domi, JT Compher, Colton Sissons, Mason Appleton, Nick Bukestad. Are we thinking Domi there?
Yeah, I think Domi probably makes sense right there.
Yeah. Max.
And not Ty, Max.
Yes. Ty will kill a bitch, and that's not what you want out of a first line forward. So that's our top line: Drouin, Domi, and Tarasenko. Line number 2. I assume we went Nino on there.
Yeah, Nino.
Probably
I think you go Nino, JT, and Appleton. I think would probably be your.
That's probably either him or Bukestad. Do you want JT or Bukestad? It's
put Bukestad up there just because of the experience.
Yeah, Nick Bukestad. And then for the right wing, you had Appleton.
Yes.
All right. So there we go. Second line, Niederreiter, Nick Bukestad, and Appleton. Third line, we still got Compher, Sissons, Gambrell, Fisher. What are you thinking?
Compher has to be on that third line for sure. You can probably put him at center and be fine with that.
Okay, and then Sissons out on right, maybe?
Yep. Yeah, Sissons out on the right side.
Okay. And then for the left wing, our best left winger will probably be Christian Fisher at this point.
Yeah, Fisher, because Aston Reese is probably your fourth line.
Correct. So we'll go with Fisher there. All right. And then Aston Reese as our fourth line left winger. Zach Aston Reese. And for our fourth line center, we still probably Gambrell.
Yeah, we got to throw Lizotte up there too. Lizotte might be a guy that you put on the right side.
Oh, let's see here. Let's see. Which one of them's a right-handed shot? Gambrell shoots right, so we can put Gambrell out there.
And then put Lizotte at center.
Yeah, yep. Lizotte at center. So that means not quite making the cut are Gadjevich, Gauthier, Logan Shaw, Tyler Benson, and Kiefer Bellows.
Most of the guys that we were going to put in the AHL.
Perfect. So that's our forward core done. All right, defense. Do we go with the geriatric Mark Giordano and PK Subban pairing for the top?
No.
Okay.
I think Go with Despair has to be up there.
All right. And then does he go with Subban? Or do you put him with
I think you put him with Giordano, who's more defensive minded. Because I think PK is still a guy that will activate offensively.
Okay. So Gost and Giordano, the two G's.
The double G line, yeah.
Double G's.
And then Subban has to go on the next one.
Yeah, otherwise he'll get pissy. He has known to speak his mind.
That he has.
All right, so and then so for who is Subban's partner?
Maybe Lazan.
Lazan, yeah. That makes sense. Oh, there we go. Lazan. All right, and then
Stetcher.
Where did my? There we go.
Stetcher and Miller, maybe.
Let's see. Troy Stetcher or Hayden Fleury or Travis Dermott. We have Zadorov.
Yeah, there's that too. But let's Travis Dermott. Let's put him there and switch out Stetcher for Fleury. Maybe. You think that might be a better combo?
Yeah, and that would probably be the way they'd want to go.
Let's see the difference. 81 points projected with Stetcher and Dermott. Let's see what you get with Fleury and Dermott.
All right.
Same thing. So, okay, you're good.
Yeah, and I would say Seattle would rather go with the youth in that regard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, already got some candidates to be traded here with Zadorov and Stetcher.
Yep.
Also, let's see. Lausanne made the cuts. Colin Miller did not make the cut.
That he did not.
And then Cal Foote, but he's 22. That's a prospect.
Yeah.
Ben Bishop, I assume, is your starter?
If he's healthy, yeah, he has to be.
Oops.
Apparently, Bish is not recognized.
No, it's not. Go figure. And then backing up
Driedger, yeah.
All right.
I mean, that's a pretty good 93-point team right there.
Tandem. That is a very good tandem. All right, so our forward lines for our audio listeners, Drouin, Domi, and Tarasenko as your number one line. A lot of playmaking to Tarasenko there. I mean, because Domi and Drouin are both natural playmakers. Niederreiter probably becomes your top goal scorer on the second line. He'll be next to Bukestad and Appleton. Bukestad will be the big ugly that you put in front of the goal at 6'6" and 230 pounds. Christian Fischer, left wing for your third line. JT Compher and Colton Sissons. Pretty good energy line there.
Yep.
Christian, Compher, and Colton, the three C's. And then grind line of Zach Aston Reese, Blake Lizotte, and Dylan Gambrell. I think Seattle would be pretty happy with that.
Well, just look at the defensive war on that right there. I mean, your top two lines have really good war offensively and maybe a little bit less defensively, but your third and fourth line have good defensive war, which will help you. You can play them against top lines and be okay with that.
And part of what's dragging down the war is Tarasenko because he just doesn't have the track record from the last couple of years. So that's kind of the wild card in all of this. And of course, you're probably thinking, well, what are you talking about Tarasenko? They're probably going to trade for Jakub Voracek. So if that's the case, put Voracek up there, and
it gets worse.
Well, Voracek's not a good defender. That's part of the issue.
And look at that. They drop 5 points projected in the standings by adding Voracek for Tarasenko.
That is what, yeah. But then again, Tarasenko, the data is incomplete, so it's. But
Yeah.
let's just say they go ahead and make that trade. So we'll leave Voracek on there. Gashaspear and Giordano are your top pairing on defense. The projected WAR there is not great. I mean, little positive offense, little positive defense. Second pairing, Jeremy Lauzon and PK Subban. They definitely don't like the defensive aspect of that, but the offense might be okay. And then, oddly enough, the best pairing, according to WAR, is the third pairing of Travis Dermott and Hayden Fleury, the kid pairing. And not so much offense, but they think that'd be a strong shutdown pairing.
So would you flip-flop like a Dermott and a Lauzon?
Well, let's see what happens there. So Dermott. Oh God, that shot.
Let's see what the switch to Lauzon there would do.
Okay, then it brings it back down, but it does kind of balance
even it out. Yeah.
So this Jay Fresh's simulator likes Travis Dermott. I think we can all kind of agree on that. So, in fact, because Dermott Subban's probably a negative player in this format. So,
brings it right up there.
So there you go, Toronto. You're losing Travis Dermott. Just get used to it. And then goaltending wise, Ben Bishop. The system still likes Ben Bishop at a 4.3 WAR. His tandem mate, Chris Drieger, 1.6. That's a pretty good goalie award, 5.9. But the projected standings points in this is 88, which probably puts them just out of the playoffs.
Yep.
But still, for an expansion team, historically, it would be definitely way better than Ottawa.
Anything's better than Ottawa.
Anything is better than Ottawa. All righty. Well, it's been over 2 hours. I want to thank you guys for being with us as long as you can. There's a few of you that actually gutted out the whole thing on the middle of a Monday. Salute to each and every one of you. But yeah, we're 2 days away from when all of our dreams or nightmares could come true. Any final thoughts as we lead to the draft?
I'm excited. I cannot wait to see what Seattle actually does and ready for the, I guess, pandemonium that surrounds it. We'll definitely recap that the expansion draft results on the Toasted Tavern episode on Wednesday night. So make sure you check that out. And I'm sure we'll talk about it next week too.
And I will say as well, if we don't know where Seattle is going to go before the picks are announced at 6 p.m., I might come on and do like a live reaction, type of a video for you, so we can react with you. But then again, if it might come out in the next 2 days, what the arrangement's going to be, that might be moot at that point. There wouldn't be any drama. So we'll keep our ears and eyes on Twitter and wherever you get your news, because there's probably been like 4 or 5 things that have happened since we started recording here that we probably missed out on. So
we were protected in Thomas Welch's fantasy expansion, our podcast. Kevin Strick, the STL Blues podcast, and us were the 3 podcasts that he was able to basically hold on to via the expansion draft. He had to pick 1 blog, 3 podcasts, and 7 Twitter accounts. So we were one of the 3 podcasts. So Thomas, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Thomas. And you hear that, Penguin Note, for excluding both me and Wags and our podcast.
We were saved.
Yeah. So there we go. I mean, we can we at least be in your AHL, Penguin Note? Can we at least be in on your farm team? Something? Can we be like the hot prospect? Don't answer right now. Think about it. All righty. That is going to do it for Toast the St. Louis Blues. We've gone long enough. I'm Tom Franklin. He is Wags. And always play to the whistle, everyone.
For new episodes, merchandise, and behind-the-scenes content, be sure to visit ToastedSTL.com or follow us on Twitter at Toasted St. Louis. I'm the voice of the Blues, Tom Calhoun. Let's get toasted!